Good morning. My name is Jennifer Ryan, and on behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today is titled Understanding Emotional Intelligence, will last approximately 45 minutes and is a pre-recorded webinar being broadcasted today, Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. Before we get started, I would like to thank our 2021 corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to affect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, support, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Please be sure to head to the AWWC website for all upcoming virtual events, along with 2 in-person events in October at the National Comp Conference and in December at the WCI Conference. Our theme this year is Through the Lens, which will allow us to take different topics each month and focus on specific conversations that bring value to our audiences. Today we join Kathy Tazic, Chicago Alliance Ambassador, as she leads us through an in-depth review of emotional intelligence. Business acumen is not enough to lead teams, retain and develop staff, and drive performance. Successful leaders have strong emotional intelligence. Recognized for lifting their teams to new heights, leaders with strong emotional intelligence are flexible, inclusive, and adapt to new situations. They are known for creating diverse teams, believe in transparency, and are empathetic. How do you assess your own emotional intelligence and learn skill sets to become a better leader? Although this is a pre-recorded session, please feel free to jump in on that chat section with comments, questions, or further conversations as we dive down into this topic. Thank you for the time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar. Welcome everyone to this week's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Jennifer Ryan, one of the board members of the Alliance. I'm so excited for you all to join us. And we have Kathy Tazic here, one of the ambassadors of the Chicago Alliance. And first off, I'm so excited for us to jump in, Kathy. When I started thinking through the topics of the year with the board, and we just finished August, which was National Wellness Month, and then September is National Learning and Development Month. When I found out that we were going to have a topic on emotional intelligence, my heart got warm and I got excited because it's near and dear to my heart. Love this topic. I think we don't talk enough about it. I think specifically about with women, we are not real and raw and honest with our feelings. So I'm going to hand this over to Kathy. Kathy, let's dive down into this topic.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you. As Jennifer said, my name is Kathy Tazic, and I'm with Sedgwick. One of the things I do at Sedgwick is lead a development program for colleagues who work with our customers. And I started learning a lot about emotional intelligence when we were preparing to do this program about 5 years ago, and it really struck a chord with me for a very specific reason that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. When I was first coming up in our industry some 25, 30 years ago, we as women, we were always, and still are to a certain degree, I was always very passionate, and still am very passionate about everything we do. And I would find that came across to people sometimes, or it was misinterpreted as being emotional. And so I would get criticized sometimes that you can't react emotionally to that. And I had to really, through kind of a process of self-awareness, really think about, what that feedback meant for me. So I started to research some things about emotional intelligence and how to really kind of understand how you're feeling, how that impacts other people, and then how you can use that to be better at those conversations and have more productive outcomes. So it's a really important topic for me personally. And then the other thing about the topic itself is that as we see people coming up in the industry, we find some of the things that we're going to talk about today, like self-awareness or motivation or understanding the other person's point of view, are not necessarily skills that come naturally. There are opportunities to work on that. So when we're giving feedback to people who are developing in their careers, a lot of times these are the kinds of things we're talking about. And if you read anything that comes out in a lot of the business journals or some of the things that are coming out about kind of the new workplace, emotional intelligence is one of the most critical things you can have to be successful in a world where general knowledge is going to be really, really important. And also, if you think about what's happened in our country and around the world this year, change and resilience and dealing with that has been so important to people being successful and healthy, which is all part of what emotional intelligence is. So thanks for having me today, Jen, and we're gonna dive right in. And I hope you'll join and ask some questions too. So here's how we're going to go about this. We're going to have 3 sessions for emotional intelligence in September. This first one, Jennifer and I are going to explore really what is EI, what is EQ, what's the difference, and how can you self-assess and build up those skills? What are the kinds of things you need to be thinking about when you're getting ready to assess your own emotional intelligence? In the second series, that'll be coming up mid-month, we'll have several employer and industry partners with us. And during that session, we're going to take this information and we're going to apply it to the real world with people who are veterans in our industry and work with some of our trading partners in our industry as well. And then in the third session, which was one that we really love to talk about, we're going to take both of these sessions and really culminate that in a session that's going to be around how you take this information in a very specific way and use it when you have to have a very important conversation, whether that is personal or professional. And I think the other thing to say about EQ in this whole conversation, Jennifer, is that this applies not just at work. You know, we're obviously talking about it in a workplace setting, but it's something that we can all use in our personal lives every day. And you'll see when we get to that third session with our employer partners that we're going to talk about this, that really you can apply a lot of this. It really just takes sort of stepping back, assessing yourself, and really thinking through, how can I handle this to get the best possible outcome for everyone? So again, we're going to define what emotional intelligence is. We're going to spend a little time on EQ versus IQ. Almost everybody's familiar with IQ, but we're going to talk about the difference between IQ and EQ. We'll talk a little bit more about how to use this every day, and then a few ways to manage and improve it. And hopefully we'll get a good dialogue going, you and I, and we can go from there.
I love it. I love it. And I love how you said that not everyone has this at the beginning of their career, or just it's not easily come to for a lot of people. So everyone that is in the audience today listening to this, if you say, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is, or I don't have this, how does it help? We all started somewhere, right? It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think too, even in career, even as you're developing your career, this isn't something that's focused on when you're working with your leaders, your managers all the time. It's not traditionally been a natural part of career development conversations. It is now coming into that. So it's a really important sort of set of skills. And there's all kinds of things you can read about, whether we'll call them soft skills, but how important they really are to the success of a business and how important they are for you as a leader and how you influence and manage other people. So I know you can all read the screen, but EI, EQ kind of used a little bit interchangeably. It's really how you use, manage, handle emotions. So if your emotional intelligence or your EQ is high, you can use that to guide how you behave in specific situations. And for me, one of the big things is understanding how I'm feeling and why. So if I understand why I'm feeling a certain way in a conversation, I can take that minute, take a step back, label that emotion, maybe compartmentalize it a little bit and say, okay, I know you feel like this, but you need to get this thing done in this situation. So deal with that later and let's get on with the task at hand. So it takes some practicing. And for me, I do it when I can feel myself talking more quickly and I can feel myself really getting animated about a particular topic in a setting that I might really need to pull back a little bit and focus on the facts versus how I'm feeling. So I had to learn it myself the hard way. So that's the overall definition of emotional intelligence. Let's talk EQ versus IQ. And the one sentence I use to describe this is EQ is IQ for your heart. That's how I always like to describe this to people, because IQ is in the traditional sense, and a lot of you have had IQ tests when you were growing up, or maybe recently, I don't know, you can go online and take them as well. But that really measures how you use logic and thinking to create plans, to strategize on problems, and adapt to changing variables in an environment. So you'll see an IQ test, you'll have the classic ink blot test, you'll have math problems, you'll have things that use logic to solve problems. So EQ is different in that it is not based on facts, it's based on how you sense the emotions you're feeling at the moment. So if you have high EQ, you're not afraid of difficult situations, although I think most of us are afraid of them just intrinsically, no matter what. It'll help you resolve conflicts because you'll have strategies to do that, and really just improve your overall relationships with others. And so when we look at EQ, there are 5 areas that we use most to measure that. It's self-awareness, and we're going to talk about that. Self-regulation, which is, as I talked about in the beginning, how do I manage how I'm feeling about this to get this done? Understanding other people's motivations, having and receiving empathy, and then just your social skills. And when we talk about social skills, I would like to talk to people about when they go into meetings. Can you read the cues in a room? How somebody's body language is paying attention, and as they're looking at you. And I know right now that's a little bit more difficult due to the fact that we're doing a lot of things on Zoom, like we're doing this meeting, and it's hard to be in the room when you can't really sit with somebody, and it makes it harder, but it also makes it equally as important.
Mm-hmm. I tell people that I love Zoom, but right now, especially because I think there's Zoom fatigue too, where everyone turns their videos off first and then turns it on. But when you have the videos off and doing sales presentation or just client stewardship meetings, where we've learned so well to watch body cues, that this really highlights the importance of it, right? Because as leaders or just as client services reps or as employees, having that skill set really gives people advantages to be able to work through the conversations.
Yeah, and I think it also makes it easier. I always say it makes it easier on my soul when I know that it's not really that just managing yourself personally just makes the whole situation easier. When you take that pressure off yourself to be perfect or to be a certain way, to be, you talked in the beginning, Jennifer, about being real with people, which is also something I like to do. And it just really does take the pressure off when you can just, you can say what you mean and say it in a way that people understand, but they're not offended by that. And it's a skill. I didn't always have it myself.
So I'm sure we'll dive down into it, if not in this session, but the next session. But I have a question. So do you think there's a difference as you're identifying or learning yourself, whether you're a colleague versus a leader, and the importance of having that emotional intelligence from a leader standpoint, managing down, and then also from those managing up? And so is there a difference on how you're able to kind of look at it from those perspectives?
I think so. There's a general human, similarity or sameness to it. But as a leader, a couple of the things that are really important, more so than almost in looking at this as an individual, is as a leader, you're looking at your whole team and the success of your whole team and making sure everybody is married to a common goal, which is the glue and what makes teams, one of the things that makes teams successful. And to do that and really understand, you're really looking at how can you use the best of the EQ of all of the people on your team, in addition to their skill set, to really get to your goal. And I think for young leaders, I tell the story all the time that my son, who's 26, is a new manager, and the kinds of questions that he has to ask are the kinds of things that I always tell him, you're working on your EQ. You are asking things like, how do I help somebody when they can't do it as fast as I need them to? And you don't understand that because you're always used to doing it fast, but you were always used to managing yourself, not others. So it's those kinds of things I think are different for leaders. And as a colleague, I think it's important because we all get into situations, particularly for people who are coming up new into the industry, that it's recognizing that you're going to have to report to and work with people that are not like you, people that do not have the same skill sets as you, people who come from diverse backgrounds. EQ really helps you work with a diverse population, either as a leader or as a colleague. So there are some similarities and some differences. For the leaders, I think it's important, really, really important, because you can motivate your team so much more if you really understand where they're coming from in a real way and respect that.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a loaded question. So, and I didn't prep you with this question, but I'm sitting here watching this screen, EQ versus IQ. What do you think is more important, IQ or EQ?
So you didn't prep me for it, but there's a lot of research now that says that EQ is more important for success at work than IQ. And that is because of a couple of things we already hit on. The dynamics of what's important to be successful at work are rapidly changing in our world. And in addition to which, change is imminent. So the ability to be resilient, to understand your situation and adapt to it has become so important that you can teach the math class, you can teach the basics, but understand how to use that skill set is really, really critical. So right now, from a researcher's perspective, there's a lot of research that says that EQ is more important in the workplace than IQ for long-term success. And when you think about it, I think about, I came to Sedgwick, there were 1,000 people, and there's 27,000 people. And we didn't get to 27,000 people by being the same ever at any time. So change just became a constant. But a lot of people, it wasn't the best environment for them because you had to be used to change being the norm. And I think if you think about our world today, all the things going on, that's become, what I've described in my own employment experience is a microcosm of what everyone's feeling in the world today with all the things we're experiencing.
Yeah. Do you think that has to do with as well as the aging workforce or the change and what's important to those coming into the workforce? Because I think about, the motivation and empathy and social skills, and maybe, our generations before us, they were just told you have to work 80 hours a week. And if you don't like your job, you don't like your job and you just do it. And now there's been a shift really in that mindset of that. And so maybe there's a correlation from that standpoint as well.
Well, if you think about it, we have 4 or 5 generations in the workplace right now. And especially in our industry, we've been talking a lot about, the great resignation, they're calling it, where, a lot of people with the pandemic have changed their minds about careers or thinking about work differently. They're valuing different things, but generationally for sure, young kids coming up value different things, which makes the EQ equation even more important as you're dealing with people in different generations, because there are different values that, like you said, let's not say 80 hours, let's say 60 or 50 hours a week people were working. And in the generation that's coming up now, that is not how they were brought into the workplace, and it's not a value to them. The time spent at work is less important than the quality of it and the meaning of it as well. So it's, yes, I think it's hugely important, really almost because of that. And if I think about it from that younger generation, and do tell this to my kids, it's important for them because of their ability then to have empathy for people that came before them, because they don't have the benefit of that experience. And I think one of the things I've learned from working someplace a long time is there's real value in expertise. There is. And for the younger generation to kind of understand and value that is something that EQ will help.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I jumped ahead because I asked the question for your next one. Is it valuable? Or
Here's what's important.
Yeah,
both are important. EQ helps you handle the stress. And I know for me and for any of you who are, we do an exercise all the time where we talk about the kind of decision maker you are. Are you an avoider? Are you somebody that goes right at it? Or do you just not do it at all? For those of you who are avoiders, having high EQ can help you make those decisions better and handle stressful situations, help you sleep better because you're not as anxious. And it's helpful personally, but it's also, as I mentioned in the last slide, it does help you work with a diverse population, and diversity is differences, whether it's age, whether it's skill set, whether it's just background, educational background. I think, for when you come into the workforce, and particularly in what we do as an industry, so many things are changing, whether it's technology, the way we speak to people, communication, values, all those things. makes that easier to manage. And then also, more satisfying relationships. There's nothing worse than having a coworker or a boss where you can't get along because you just don't see eye to eye on things. So kind of looking at understanding why you're feeling like that and finding some common ground can be really valuable for everybody. So just a little bit of a primer there. Any other questions, Jen, on that?
No, I think when we talk about how it's important, right? What's important? How does one know whether or not you have emotional intelligence?
Well, I think if you, and there's a couple of steps you can take, and I moved on to this slide because it kind of covers it here. There's things you can work on to know whether you have emotional intelligence or not. There's evaluations you can take, and if you've ever had coaching of any kind, usually start with an EQ overview, because combining that EQ with kind of your skill set helps to see a big picture of your leadership ability. But you start with self-awareness. So, and self-awareness means, are you able to read in a room how people are perceiving you? There's ways, and I'm going to go through each one. There's ways to go about that. So if you don't know whether you're self-aware, the easiest way to improve on that is that every meeting or interaction you have, ask whoever's in the room to give you feedback about that. How did I perform in that meeting? Is there anything I need to be thinking about in terms of my skill set? One of the reasons people don't get feedback routinely is because they don't ask for it. So asking for that feedback from others and then kind of doing an individual evaluation of yourself. And there's books and all kinds of things out there to get to that self-awareness place. The second one, and this one I'm only laughing because it defines my life, which is examining your responses to stressful situations. And working for a high growth company and a company that values customers the most is something that creates stressful situations because you're always trying to perform at the highest level possible. And in my younger years, just coming into my career, my response to that stress was to work more. And my response now is to take a walk, do some yoga, have a glass of wine if it's after 5, and really kind of think it through more than just reacting. So the thoughtfulness behind how you manage stress is something that's changed, at least for me, as I've gone through my career. The third one's really hard, self-management. So if you know that you have high IQ, if you can manage your emotions, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have them, because that is not at all what this is about. So for me, I've had several situations where I had to learn to take how somebody was communicating with me and manage my reaction to that. So and I could only do it with the help of a lot of people, and over time, just to say, you know what, before you react, think about that and manage how you feel. You can put it in that box to the side and get back to it later if you want to feel badly about it. But right now, be assertive. Assertive communication style always helps with this. Confident, and manage the way you're feeling about it in the moment. You don't always have to say what you're thinking at the moment you're thinking it. That's a hard lesson to learn too. Social awareness, we covered this too. I think you can get at that. You can know whether you have that through that feedback, and it kind of couples with self-awareness, because you want to be aware of kind of what your social surroundings are and what might or might not be appropriate. And then relationship management. Are you having a lot of conflicts? Do you have more conflicts with people that you work with than not? That might be a sign that you need to be thinking about the why behind that. But it all starts with kind of that self-assessment. And I always encourage people to reach out, not just when we do 360s, we always say, you ask people to do the 360s, not that just are your raving fans. That's easy to do. You want to get those 360 evaluations or get that feedback from people who maybe are more critical of you, because you'll get the best lessons there from people who maybe view you a different way.
Mm-hmm. When you look at self-awareness, what do you tell people that internalize it and don't take it from a positive? So as you're trying to figure out your EQ or improving your EQ, what are some recommendations for our followers out there that, constructive criticism or feedback, they internalize it and it could kind of do more harm than good. So how do you maneuver through that?
So that's a really, really good question. And I learned from a lot of people that feedback is a gift. So the first thing is to really understand that whatever people are telling you, it's something that you should learn from. It doesn't mean you have to change everything about yourself, because sometimes there are just people that have different personalities than other people. but internalizing it is something you have to work really hard to get out of. And I think that takes a little bit of maturity. So some of that's time, but also examples where instead of taking the feedback that someone tells you and immediately saying, that's not true, really think about the why. And I've had that in my career too, where people would tell me something and I would react right away. And now I would say, well, why am I getting that feedback? Let me think about what it is that I'm not picking up on in the situation. So I think it's reflecting, and it's also being a little vulnerable and sharing it with others, which I know is really hard for people too, which is why I'm so glad for forums like this, because the more we all talk about it as a group, even just sharing all of this with you today, even though I know we're going to be sharing this with a lot more people, it just makes it makes it a lighter load for everybody. So really just finding that group where you can be vulnerable and ask those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know if you are improving on your emotional intelligence? How do you know where your growth is? What were some things within your career that maybe might help the audience, especially those newer in the industry, on, is there a roadmap, or is there pieces where you're like, you had this aha moment and you're like, okay, I get it, or there is growth?
Well, I had a lot of great mentors who were generation before me, who spent a lot of time listening to me doing public speaking, who had no problem giving the feedback. And I used to have a problem with it and got over that when I realized that it made me better at communicating publicly and the kinds of things they were really trying to do without telling me that's what they were trying to do. And I think one of the, there's a couple of really, really big lessons, I think. But one of them is that I learned that people thought I was, and I mentioned it before, people thought I was being emotional. They also would think I'm being abrupt because I'm asking a lot of questions when I'm learning something inside our company or talking with a customer, because I want to provide the best solution. So my brain works like I have to ask you when I'm thinking about it. And so people used to get put off by that kind of direct style. Not everybody loves people that are very upfront and direct with them. So I had some guidance from one of my coaches who said, start off your meetings, and I do it every time now. If you meet with somebody that doesn't know you or work with you every day, explain it to them. Just tell them the truth. This is how I learn. This is why I ask questions. I'm not, I might seem like I'm being straightforward. I am, but the reason I'm asking questions as we go is because that's how I learn, and that's how we'll get to the best end result. And I was shocked at how much of a difference it made at work for me. So I do that pretty routinely now, but some of it comes with, and I do say this to people too, is finding ways to have experiences that allow you to grow from that, because kind of staying in that box, in the box that you're in your job every day, look for ways to expand your reach so that you can have experiences that will expose you to different things to get that different feedback. Those two things.
Mm-hmm. One thing, as I'm hearing you talk, kind of resonates on, improving your EQ does not mean changing who you are or your authenticity. It's just being aware and growing and being able to set expectations. And at the end of the day, it's just communicating, right? And
right.
So I think there's a big piece on that. Is there's sometimes, and maybe I'm self-projecting what I've thought of is, at the beginning of my career, I was told that I don't have empathy, and I'm like, well, one, what is empathy? And two, why is that bad? Because you think that you need to be this stoic person and not have
right.
emotions, and how do you pull emotions out, or how do you show it without it being too overly anything, right? And so it's not necessary. One thing that I was told was, Jen, do not lose your authentic self, but there's pieces of that you either need to set expectations or verbalize, hey, this is how I learn. This is my leadership style. This is how I work, and this is how I collaborate. Or,
right.
Hey, I grew up in the North. I'm Italian. I'm firstborn. I'm a natural redhead, and I'm a A-type personality. So I literally joke around to say, hey guys, this is me. But if I'm straightforward, it's not me angry or mad or not have the time of day. That's just my natural personality.
Being authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a leader too who, and I always respected this. I'll never forget this story, that when we would have teams, we would say to one of our senior leaders, we want you to be on one of these teams if we're trying to solve a problem. And he would say, you don't want me on a team. And we would all be offended. He'd say, no, because I'll just tell everybody what to do. I'm not really that collaborative. So have somebody else be on the team, And we got better diversity and diversity of opinions that way. But that being authentic then opens people up and lets them know you're just a human being like them. You know, I think it makes it easier for everybody.
For sure.
Well, I'm excited about the sessions that are coming. I know we've got 2 more to come, and appreciate everybody joining today. We're going to be talking with our leaders that are coming up in the next session about how they've gone through the journey that Jen and I are talking about today, and how they use and improve their EQ. So we hope you learned a little something about the basics today. And I know I really enjoyed working with you on this, Jen. So thanks a lot for having me today. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks with everyone else.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you
Thank you.
everyone for joining. We look forward to seeing you guys in the next couple sessions. Just to let everyone know, this session is on demand. So feel free to go to our YouTube channel. It'll be up in a few hours after this session. And if you have any questions for Kathy, feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of good info coming out with emotional intelligence, what it is, how do you apply it, crucial conversations. So this month, full of great info. So thanks again, Kathy. And
thanks so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.